All right, so I have everything set up so I can start my watercolor background. I've got my watercolor paper with the edges taped off. This tape, when we're done with our painting and it's dry, we're going to carefully peel that tape off and it'll leave a really nice clean white edge. I also have the my water is in just like I have just a regular little teacup here with water, but you could use whatever container you have handy. And I have my paintbrush. These are the same paintbrushes that we used for our acrylic little painting series. I just made sure I cleaned it really well. And then I have just like a piece of paper towel that I folded up that if my brush gets too wet or if my paper gets too wet, I can use that to wipe the brush off or even just blot the paper. I can also use this to test colors as I mix them. Now, your paint palette is a little different than what we would have at school. At school, we have packaged containers that have a whole range of colors. This, we only have the primary colors, which as you know are red, yellow, and honestly, I don't know if this one's blue or this one's blue, but one of them is blue. And then there is a bonus color here that's green. We'll find out which one is which in just a second. This paint that we have, it seems like it's dry. It seems like it's not going to do anything. But these watercolors came in tubes. And I just squirted them onto these little paper plates and I set them in the sun so that they would dry out. And because they're watercolors, all I have to do to get them going again is get them wet. So we'll find out if this is blue. Oh, nope, this is green. As you can see, it's coming to life as I add water. And I'm going to rinse out my paintbrush to show you what that blue looks like. So I just rinsed out my brush. I give it a little swirl in the water. I wipe my brush off on the side of the cup so I can control the amount of water that's in there. And as I get this one wet, as you can see, it's coming to life. And it is a really beautiful shade of blue. Okay. What we're going for here with this painting, we're not going to be necessarily painting a picture of anything in particular. I want you to think about colors and how different colors make you feel. I want you to practice mixing colors. So like I said, I gave you the primary colors, plus there's green. That one's already mixed for you. But let's say you want to make orange. You've got this red and yellow. So if you get those mixed together, that's going to create orange. I just want you to kind of have fun painting and putting down colors in different places on your background paper. Later, we're going to be adding another technique on top of this that is going to make it a more finished piece. So I'm just going to lay down some blue. When you get the paint in your brush, that's called loading the brush. And the more I rub the wet paintbrush on here, the more intense and vibrant that color is going to be. So right now I'm just laying down some blue just to get started. You can start with whatever color you want to start with. Now if I wanted to create like a turquoise or a teal, I'd want to add a little bit of green. So I'm going to rinse my brush out, load it with some green, and then add that in to the blue. Now with watercolors, you can add layers upon layers. So I can go back, I'm letting some of the green and the blue, kind of blending them together. It's creating a whole new shade of color. This like beautiful blue-green that you see on the color wheel. I can load a little bit more in to make it a little more vibrant. And I think now I'm going to switch over and start making like a yellow-green. So I'm going to just load my brush with yellow. And I can blend that in and do a layer of yellow on top of the green, and it's going to start to create more variations on yellow, green. And if I put it on this darker area, it's going to make a different shade of green. So for this part of this project, I just really want you to play and experiment and see how it feels to load that brush, really get a lot of paint on there. See what happens when you add layers on top of that, and just sort of fill in an interesting color scheme, color background. Okay. One thing I do want to show you is that you can do a technique that a lot of watercolor artists use called wet on wet. And what that is I'm going to start, right now I just want to make sure my brush is clean. So I'm just going to rinse it in the water, kind of check it on my paper towel. It seems like this brush has most of the color out of it. So now I'm just going to take some water and kind of make a puddle on my paper. This is just plain water. Once I have a little puddle on there, I'm going to load my brush. In this case, I'm going to use this red. It looks like a very orangey red, and I'm going to show you how to make a different shade of red in just a second. So I have this blank puddle. Now I'm just going to put a little bit of color in there. And having that wet paint on wet paper is what we call wet on wet. And you can do some cool textures in here. When it's wet like this, when there's a lot of water, you can use your brush to create brush stroke texture. You can also like tear off like a little piece of paper towel and wad it up and then do what we call blotting and just pull away some of that color. Kind of makes it look like a cloudy shape, right? Because you're just pulling out some of that color and it kind of smears and smushes what's left behind. You can also blend colors this way. So I'm going to add a little bit more water. And I'm going to do a little bit of red. And I bet you can predict what's going to happen if I add a little bit of blue. And you can see how it's kind of spreading and diffusing. And that mixture of red and blue is going to start to create some different shades of violet. Okay, so you can kind of play with that, see what new colors you can create, right? And textures. Now, as I was saying, if you want to make a red that's a little bit more of a, what we would call like a blue red, not so orangey, you can put down a layer of that red and then just add a little bit of blue into it. And that's going to kind of soften and neutralize the orange in that red to make a deeper shade of red. Hey June, would you grab me the salt?
Oh, sure.
I just asked June to grab me some salt because I'm going to show you one more trick that if you are so inclined, you can try. So I'm putting a lot of paint on here, really loading my brush, getting a nice thick layer of paint. While it's wet, this is kind of like a fun little trick. If you sprinkle a little bit of salt, and this is just like salt, regular salt from a salt shaker, like table salt. I'm going to take a little of that salt and sprinkle it on the wet paint. And you're going to notice kind of right away that the salt crystals are going to start to absorb some of the paint. But what's going to happen is once this dries and you kind of wipe that salt off, you're going to see that it leaves behind these sort of crystal little texture prints. And it's like a really cool effect that you can try. So for this painting, I want you to play. I want you to mix colors. I want you to try some different techniques and just cover this whole space with color, okay? If you want to think about a certain mood that you're trying to convey, like you want to stick to cool colors, that's fine. If you just want to play and make it more rainbow colors, that's fine too. This is just the first phase of this project, and I just want you to have fun with watercolors.